Namaskar, warm greetings from DELNET Developing Library Network, New Delhi, India. Distinguished luminary speaker, Dr. Alok Aggarwal, founder and CEO, Scry AI. Shrikesh Kumar, President DELNET. Dr. S.S. Murthy, Vice President. Dr. P.R. Goswami, Treasurer. Officials including Mrs. Aprajita Dikshit and Mr. Deepak Kathat from Scry AI. Heads of institutions, including the directors, principals, deans, HODs, distinguished librarians, and library and information science professionals, educational administrators, IQAC officials, faculty, researchers, scholars, students, my colleagues at DELNET New Delhi, and also its coordination units at Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, ladies and gentlemen. I, Dr. Sangeeta Kaul, Director DELNET, on behalf of DELNET New Delhi, extends a very warm, hearty welcome to all of you for joining us today from various parts of the country and also many other nations across the globe, including Bangladesh, Bhutan, Canada, China, Hong Kong, Nigeria, Pakistan, South Africa, Sri Lanka, UAE, and USA for an enlightening book talk on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI, 1950 to 2050, the truth about AI and why it's only a tool, 2024 publication, authored by the distinguished author and speaker of today's session, Dr. Alok Aggarwal ji. We are much grateful to each one of you for your very overwhelming response, as more than 1,300 participants from across the globe have registered for today's session. At the very outset, on behalf of DELNET, we would like to express a very warm, sincere gratitude and thanks to the distinguished speaker, Dr. Alok Aggarwal ji, for acceding to our request to be there with us, joining us today from USA in the wee hours at 3 o'clock in the morning to share his vast wisdom and expertise on the subject of AI, reflected in his recently authored book title. It's a profound honor and pleasure, sir, for us to have you among us today. And thank you so very much for your very, very gracious acceptance and very kind intellectual presence with us in this session. I have an immense pleasure in introducing Dr. Alok Aggarwal, who is a founder and CEO at Scry AI. He has an illustrious background in the field of technology and innovation and received his BTech from IIT Delhi in 1980 and in his PhD from Johns Hopkins University in US in 1984. In January 1998, Dr. Aggarwal founded IBM's India Research Laboratory, which he had set it up at IIT Delhi and grew it to a 60-member team by August 2000. He co-founded eValueServe in January 2001 and was its chairman until 2013, providing research and analytic services to clients across the globe. Dr. Aggarwal has more than 8 patents to his credit, approved by the US Patents and Trademark Office. He also received the Distinguished IIT Delhi Alumni Award in 2008. It's a profound honor and pleasure, sir, to have you with us today. And thank you so very much for your very, very generous support to us in having you here today with us. I don't want to stand between you and our colleagues who have joined from different nooks and parts of India and also many other countries. May I have an immense pleasure, sir, now in requesting you to kindly start the session. Also would be requesting you, sir, to kindly, accept this invite to make the screen sharing, enabled from your end. It's over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. And is my screen being shared now?
Yes, so we can have it in a slide mode, sir, if you can have it in the slideshow.
How about now?
This is perfect. Yes, sir. Very, very much, sir. Yes, please.
Great. Give me 1 second. Let me hide the PowerPoint. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Alok Aggarwal. As Sangeeta ji already introduced me, I'm the CEO and co-founder and founder of Scry Analytics. Not going into Scry at all. The aim of this particular talk is to discuss the fourth industrial revolution and 100 years of AI. And I'll spend a fair bit of time actually on the fourth industrial revolution, because we are going through the midst of it. Like any revolution, there will be a lot of changes. And as much as data and AI are going to be the most important characteristics of this revolution, there are many other inventions that would be also interesting, and it's worth reviewing them just briefly. So this book that I wrote was printed in December 17th, 2023. It's about 6 months. Planning to write a follow-on version next year to convert it into a textbook with 2 volumes with exercises so that it can be used as a 3 or a 4 credit course in India, in US, everywhere else, wherever people want to. It will have exercises, and it's meant to be a 3 to 4 credit course in general. The book is not about software. There is no software code in particular. There is very little math. It talks about AI and the fourth industrial revolution from the very basics. So a lot of it is about discussing what's going on, what has happened, and what is likely to happen. There are 17 chapters, 1 appendix, technical appendix, and another one with about 100 use cases of AI. So first question, while I started writing the book in January 2020, and it took a long time because I thought I knew a lot about AI. I've been doing it since my days of a PhD in 1980s. But then I realized while writing the book, and probably every author realizes the same, that he or she does not know enough, that they thought that they knew a lot, but they do not know all. And therefore, I had to start from scratch. What really defines an industrial revolution? We always talk about we are in the third revolution, we were in the second one, this is the fourth one. What are the characteristics of industrial revolutions? So let me start with 8 vital characteristics that I found. And these are important, not because they were in the past, but because they're also manifesting themselves now. So with that, let me start with the very first one. Every revolution, the first characteristic is every revolution has many key inventions. So in the first revolution, which started in 1760 to 1840, the main invention was steam engine. The steam engine was used, as many of you may recall, even in India until, I would say, until 1990s, for moving trains around and moving several things, other locomotives around. But then there were other inventions like spinning jenny for textile engineering, water frame, spinning mule. There were inventions for converting wheat into flour by using various kinds of moving parts. The main invention which diversified was the steam engine. And the thing which made it diversify was obviously the steam infrastructure. You needed steam to propel the steam engine. And sometimes for that, you need water. So water canals were created and so on. Second revolution, there were automobiles. There was QWERTY typewriter that we use all the time. Internal combustion engine led to automobiles, telegraph, telephone, incandescent lamp, electric trams, electric railways. The main invention, again, which got diversified, which started being used everywhere, was the electric motors. There are about 3,500 electric motors today. And these electric motors are run obviously by electricity. So there is the underlying electricity infrastructure. Again, to repeat, the first revolution had steam engines. The underlying infrastructure was steam and waterworks, water canals, how steam was being produced locally or globally or in a district and so on. This time it was electric motors and electric infrastructure. The third revolution we started after the Second World War in 1950 with ENIAC, which was the first electronic numerical integrated in computer, was also saw silicon-based transistors. Very soon, ENIAC, which was based on valves and vacuum tubes and bulbs, was replaced by silicon. Very few people, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few people remember what these vacuum tubes look like. There was the internet, World Wide Web, solar electricity cells, smartphones. The two key, again, inventions, one was the central processing units. These are the processors that we have. They're in our smartphones. They're now even in our refrigerators. Of course, they're in laptops. They're in the heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. And the thing which makes it all happen, the underlying infrastructure is electronic communication. Broadband communication coming to our houses, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, wireless communication. In fact, about 93% of India currently has smartphones or not so smartphones, all connected by various kinds of electronic communication, Wi-Fi or wireless. So again, you see there is a pattern that is being formed. Central processing units became diversified, they became ubiquitous, and the underlying infrastructure was electronic communication, which helped CPUs become even better. But it didn't only help that, it also helped other things connected to each other. For example, a video camera could now be connected to the main station via electronic communication. Similarly, electricity did not only power electric motors, but also it helped incandescent bulbs, lights that is, as we all know. It makes heating and cooling happen, and so on and so forth. So the fourth one has several inventions. One is, I won't go into details, Internet of Things, a lot of smart sensors and devices. There is inventions which are coming to because of climate change. You folks are already literally burning at 52 degrees right now in Delhi, and this is part of what is happening in climate change. Delhi and other places like Delhi will become hotter as time goes by, and there will be more rain also, but not as well defined as we used to. So there are a lot of inventions that are gradually happening, and the next 25 years will see a lot of inventions and a lot of changes in the world because of climate change. I think the world will wake up it's kind of woken up, but it's not doing enough with respect to climate change, and we'll see a lot. Another invention is because of blockchains. I won't go into that in detail, but basically taking out the middleman, so to speak. So you can say that there is no central bank like ICICI in between, but people who are talking to each other, who are working with each other, they can actually exchange money, exchange contracts, they can buy and sell without having any middleman. This is again one of those things, like most other inventions, will take time to percolate in the society, but blockchain is one of the key inventions of this industrial revolution. Another one is those related to healthcare. So for example, when within our cells, when a protein is created, it's kind of a linear line that you can see, and it has to fold in a proper way. And if it doesn't fold, then actually the cell cannot function properly. So that's another invention which is very important to understand how proteins fold, which could be DNA, which could be other kind of proteins in the cell, and so on. Other inventions are related to personalized healthcare and gene editing, and so on. A lot of inventions regarding robots, driverless vehicles, 3D printing, quantum computing, and then of course extended and augmented reality. The main inventions, just like we had two very key inventions in each of the industrial revolutions, the main invention here is AI. Started in 1950, we'll go through that in a somewhat detail. And actually, very quickly in 1955, people got very excited. The 10 pioneers of AI got very excited, and a lot of hype occurred at that time. And then unfortunately it fizzled out because the problems they were trying to solve are actually hard problems. We haven't solved many of those problems even today. So the AI nevertheless has become already diversified. We're putting up about 1,000 use cases on our website, scryai.com. for the particular kind of problems that are already being solved by AI, and I don't only mean what today's buzz is. Today's buzz is about LLMs, large language models, and generative AI. These are regular problems which are solved by AI systems, by AI algorithms, which have been known and improved over the last seven and a half decades. But AI is very much like, to me, like steam engines, electric motors, and CPUs, which got diversified. The second one, which is, of course, the infrastructure, is data. So without data, there is no AI. In fact, because you need data to train the AI models, to train machine learning models. Data itself is very easy to get because we are always talking to each other. We are doing some computation. The processors in water cleaning systems are running. They're producing data. So data is being produced all the time. But most of the time, the data is noisy. That means it has errors. It needs to be clean and it needs to be harmonized because data coming from, for example, from a finance department may be different. They may say revenue, and the revenue definition may be different than what is in sales department. The reason is because some of the razors, for example, which were being produced in the company, Gillette razors, let's say produced by Procter & Gamble, were not basically being sold. They were being given out as handouts or as part of advertisements. So as you can see, data has a lot of facets. Some of them is how contextual it is, data quality, and so on. People, just like you have water, steam, you had electricity, and then electronic communication, there was infrastructures being created due to these three inventions. Electricity infrastructure is, of course, electric generation plants, distribution, consumption, and so on. Data, similarly, and infrastructure related to data is being created. Many times you have very localized infrastructure, just like we had localized electric generators, where you still have quite a few electric generators in India because the electricity every now and then goes away for an hour, or sometimes less, sometimes more, and sometimes even in the US, and therefore you have electric generators which are very local, and then you have the electric generation plants which are very global in nature, or feeding a lot of communities. And the same will be true about data. In fact, our analysis, which is part of the book, showed that even if we take 0.001% of non-duplicated internet data, to clean it, contextualize it, harmonize it, it will take $5 trillion, not billion, $1 trillion to do all that, which is quite a lot, given that currently the total GDP of the world is only about $100 to $105 trillion. So again, what I want to leave you with is there are many, this is the first one, first characteristics of the 8. There are many inventions, but there are 2 inventions which have become, in each of them, which became quite useful. In this particular case, it will be AI and data and infrastructure. Data infrastructure will create an infrastructure, and AI will be pervasive, ubiquitous. So this is what we already discussed, that steam engines became pervasive. This is the second characteristic. It became pervasive, started using steam, and very quickly people were using steam for moving boats, for moving trains and other parts of locomotives. Second invention, it was the electric motor. Third was CPUs, and now of course we have AI. Similarly, infrastructure-wise, just to repeat, the first one required an infrastructure of waterworks and steam to improve steam engines and other things. Second required electric motors, and the third one required CPUs. Yeah. So the fourth one is all about AI, and now about data. Now, so we have covered three characteristics so far. The first being there are typically many inventions in an industrial revolution. Second is one invention becomes pervasive, diversified, and ubiquitous. AI will do that. The third characteristic is that there will be an infrastructure which will be driving AI. And we expect that to happen also, and already happening in a small scale. Companies are cleaning up their data, they're using data to train their AI systems and so on. The fourth characteristics is that technology takes time before it seeps into the society. It is not, even though these inventions are so monumental, it is not that these inventions immediately go into the society within a year or 2 years. For example, the very first invention regarding steam engines was created in 1804, but it was only in 1830 that the first railways were actually introduced between Liverpool and Manchester. But they were such a hit, by the way, and those of in India, we can relate to that, that people loved it so much, loved these new railways so much that they were sitting on the trains while it was being driven from Liverpool to Manchester or vice versa. Similarly, the second revolution, however, I mean, even though they were introduced in 1830, in US and UK, they really became the way to travel in 1890s to 1900. So it was 6 to 7 decades that people really started using it. And before that, it was being used for freight trains, but even freight trains only started around 1875. The second part of, the second revolution, Thomas Alva Edison started Edison Electric Generation Plant in 1882. So even though he started in 1882 and US was becoming the topmost country in the world, even then, half of the homes had electricity in only 1925. So as you can see, the first industrial revolution, the most important invention, steam locomotive, became commonplace in about 5 decades, roughly speaking. Same in second industrial revolution, it was about 40 years later. Why is that? I mean, the third one, the same thing is true about, by the way, about electronic communication. The smartphones, the phones themselves mobile phones were invented by Cooper in 1971, part of Motorola. But as we know, phones and smartphones became common only 20 years later. So the time of things seeping into the society is going down gradually, but still it takes time to seep into the society. Why am I saying that? Because if we predict about AI in the future, it will take time for AI to seep into the society rather deeply. Why does technology take time to seep into the society? One is it needs infrastructure. We were talking about the data infrastructure, which needs capital infusion. Second important one is people want return on investments. So for example, if I've already bought a car which runs on gasoline or petrol, I'm not likely to buy an electronic vehicle immediately because I want to at least use that car so that at least my money is paid for. Third very common thing is if it ain't broke, why fix it? So why spend the time doing something with, hey, everything is going fine, let's not fix it. Another one, which is very particularly common amongst companies and entrepreneurs, what got me here, look, I'm already very successful, what got me here will also get me there. Humans are risk averse, they don't want to try new things. If I fail as a middle management, my boss will effectively fire me. If I do well, I'm not sure I'll get the right rewards. Workforce needs to be uptrained, regulations need to change, a lot of time for consumers to adapt. We saw that actually, that typically once the technology seeps into the society, which is much later, it does help the society quite a bit. So even though technology takes time to seep into the society, what happens is when the new inventions come about, the inventors become very excited. Like the case in Liverpool to Manchester, the steam locomotive by Stephenson, he became very excited. They excite the investors who begin to pour in money. Then the media gets all excited. The media gets euphoric. And once the media gets euphoric, everyone else who is reading the media, the whole society gets excited. And that's the beginning of a hype cycle, that you basically people are buying more and more of the stock, and so on and so forth. So even though it will take 20 years, 30 years, 40 years for an invention to really seep into the society, people think that this is going to happen tomorrow, and it almost never does. And then because of that boom, the next thing follows is a bust. In 1880s, there were 70,000 miles of railroads and stations that were constructed in the US alone. $60 billion was spent. Similarly, about 11,000 miles of railroads and stations were created in UK, spending a lot of money. But by 1890s, because railroads could not return the investment, pretty much all railroads in the US went bankrupt, depressing prices, leading to very quickly, for a reason which they were not meant for, namely transportation of goods. They were meant for transporting humans, transporting people, and suddenly Procter and Gamble, for example, realized that they can build their stuff, shampoos, soaps, etc., candles in Ohio, which was a cheap place, and transport it to New York City, which was a more expensive place, thereby making money. So it took about, basically railroads went bankrupt, most of them. Same thing we saw with telegraph. Marconi invented it very quickly from 2000. It went from 2,000 miles of telegraph to 23,000, but there was very little traffic. It failed. More recently, we would remember the dot-com and the telecom boom in 1990s. There was a total of about 500 billion, not million, $500 billion that was used around the world to lay out all these various kinds of cables under sea, cables under earth, and so on. However, it wasn't used because technology takes time to seep into the society. Only 5% of it was being used in 2001, and hence the prices crashed, and that was the beginning of the dot-com bust and the telecom bust. But by 2006, because the prices crashed, 40% of the homes had broadband connections. The interesting part, not that all booms end up in anything useful, but the interesting part, going back to it, if we go back to railroads, communication infrastructure, telegraph infrastructure, the interesting part is all of these created an infrastructure. They required a lot of money, and this money would not have come in if it weren't for the hype that was created. So although we look at hypes always in a negative sense, actually these hypes were extremely important for the society. Because if there wasn't a hype about railroad infrastructure, nobody would have put that kind of money, and it would have taken much more time to effectively put railroads. The same is true about telegraphs. The same is true about broadband communication, about putting cables undersea and in the earth. So even though we often look at hype cycles always as a negative thing, and of course, the investors who lose their shirts are bound to look at negative things, but hype cycles are actually good for the society, and because they help in solving some of the very key problems which require a lot of infrastructure. Yeah. So the hype cycle recently happened in driverless cars. The driverless cars started in 1977 with the Japanese companies starting it. They drove a driverless car for 20 miles, realized that all they can do is drive it on a straight road, and it was using this white lines on the road to drive it. Ernst Dickmans got very excited in 1980s. He drove driverless cars. Mercedes, Daimler-Benz got excited. They actually funded him to the tune of $3 million, not billion, $3 million. Carnegie Mellon got excited in 1980s. Again, they realized that the problem was too hard, and what cars they were producing were rudimentary, and they died. The whole process died. The same thing now recently happened with Waymo. which is a Google company. It became very famous because it could solve some problems which were not solved before. Morgan Stanley gave it a valuation of Waymo as 175 billion, which interestingly is 1.6 times that of the three top car companies here in the US, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Chrysler is now called Stellantis. So imagine a new car company like Waymo getting valuation of all the three top car companies. Of course, Tesla is an electric vehicle. I kept it out, but 1.6 times that. 100 billion have been put in driverless cars, and unfortunately, it's only about last 2 years that we realized that the problem is much harder. Cars have to be trained much more. There are so many things that humans are able to do which cars cannot even today. For example, making a left unprotected turn. So if the traffic light is not showing that is showing green and nobody is coming, we as humans make very quickly left unprotected turns. A bigger issue is suppose there is a four-way intersection and you have four driverless cars sitting, then each of them would ask the other one to go first, and therefore there would be a traffic jam. It reminds me of in India, people say "pehle aap," and nobody moves, and that's pretty much what happens with driverless cars. And people who are actually driving behind, I mean, the second car which is behind a driverless car gets very frustrated. So since then, since 2020, the driverless cars, the boom has gone bust. 6 driverless companies, trucking companies went bankrupt. Waymo's valuation has dropped to about 15%, 10% of its original valuation. Many other companies either got bought out or were closed. So that often happens in societies. The sixth point is, once inventions seep into the society, their effects are much more than anticipated. For example, once we had telecom revolution, broadband revolution, so to speak, more importantly, who would have expected in 2000 that we would be all hooked on to social media the way we are? Who would have thought that we would be all hooked on to smartphones and our WhatsApp as we are? So who would have thought after railroads crashed that actually the companies which will be making money and which will be using railroads would be companies like Hindustan Lever types, Unilever, for example, or Procter and Gamble? Who would have thought the telegraph would be used for money transfer and information flow? Reuters, ANP, Associated Press, Reuters, etc., all started. So the sixth characteristic is that these companies become particularly, these inventions become particularly interesting a few years after they've seeped into the society, and new advantages, new inventions which sit on top of them come about, which were not anticipated earlier. The seventh one is that these are revolutions, and just like you have political revolutions or social revolutions, Russia in 1917, China in 1949, every revolution appends the status quo. It changes what was there. With the first revolution, there was the Luddite movement. Luddites were the people who did not want these steam engines coming into textiles because they were artisans, they were making textiles by hand, and they were very afraid, rightly so, that their jobs will go away. So that was the first time when people were really afraid of jobs. But at the same time, if you look at seasonal farm workers, they only had work about 6 months. There were two seasons when when the seeds would be sowed and the farm would be cut. They were only about 6 to 8 months they were working, but now when they were working in textiles, they were working all the way long, all the year round. Poor youth and orphans actually got very bad jobs, the hardworking and very tragic or at least risky jobs in mines by doing coal mining, etc. Housing shortage in London was so bad that there were sewage that was overflowing. So there were many negatives as many positives, at least in the short term. Long term, of course, as we know, all of these countries which were part of the Industrial Revolution improved quite a bit. But the short term implications were actually quite bad. And in fact, Karl Marx was almost forced to write the book Das Kapital, which was about haves and have nots, which really created social revolutions. So you have the people who were losers, you have people who were winners, there were jobs that were lost, and there were jobs that were gained. Interestingly, after doing enormous research, I could not find a single place which could tell me in any of these revolutions how many jobs were lost and how many were gained. And the reason is that these revolutions don't sit by themselves, they are sitting in part of the society. So therefore, although jobs were being lost and gained, the precise number of how many were gained and lost had many things, other things going on. For example, in the first revolution, there was England was fighting Napoleon Bonaparte in France, and therefore a lot of jobs got created because of that. People had to create pulleys and other things at that time to fight French. So what we do know is those countries which were active in the industrial revolutions, their GDP increased. But for example, China and India, and when I say India, it was India including Pakistan, Bangladesh, and some of Afghanistan also. They jointly contributed to about half of the world's GDP, about 47% of world's GDP in 1700. So about half of the world's GDP was coming from India and China alone. And they did not contribute, they did not partake in these industrial revolutions. It came down to about 8% in 1973. Then the reason I'm bringing this up is because in this industrial revolution, most of the countries will be participating. Out of 192 countries, the expectation is at least 150 countries will be participating, and their GDPs will be going up simultaneously. But again, with respect to jobs lost and jobs gained, there is the whole society at hand. We cannot look at the jobs lost or gained only due to AI. For example, one of the very important aspects of the society is what is called the total fertility ratio. Total fertility ratio is the number of kids a single woman would have during her lifetime. So in a society, if the total number of the total fertility ratio goes below 2.1, then gradually the population of that society begins to dwindle. Currently, there are about 10 such countries who have less than 2.1 TFR, total fertility ratio. Japan, China, and Italy being the biggest ones, but then there are smaller ones also. And generally, when the total fertility ratio goes down, number of people who are working obviously goes down because you just don't have enough people. The population is going down. Your aged population and number of people are going down who are working, which reduces the GDP. By 2050, there will be about 55 countries who will have a total fertility ratio of less than 2.1 and whose population will begin to go down. In fact, for India, in 2021, the total fertility ratio went down to 2.05. Now, the population in India will not reduce in the near future because India will improve. It has been improving and will continue to improve healthcare. So the average age of an Indian total life expectancy is 68 years, is expected to be 78 within the next 20 years. And because of the age expectancy, more people will live, and hence you won't have a drop in the population. But that's a very important aspect. So in the current revolution, as I said, more effects of aging and slowly growing population. And this is particularly important because people say, hey, it will take my jobs away. Yes, it will take jobs away by 2050, it meaning AI and data science. But by that time, we may not have enough people to do all the work. And we may be begging, in fact, that AI or thanking our stars that AI and data science are there to help. Robots are there, AI is there to help us do some of the jobs which humans were doing because we may not have humans by that time. There will be new jobs created due to climate change. And of course, we'll lose a lot of jobs if climate change is not fought aggressively. You folks are feeling it badly in India right now, and this is going to happen repeatedly, not only in India, but in coastal places, floods and so on. But then there will be massive number of jobs being created in the 6 emerging economies. As I said earlier, because of the total fertility rate going down, in 2021 there were 3.2 billion people out of 8 billion people, roughly speaking. 3.2 billion, 40% of the people were working age people. In 2050, the total population would be about 10 billion, 3.9 billion would be working. So you already see that the population will, the working population would have decreased rapidly from that. So that is an important issue in mind. I would not go into the jobs that would be created, but let me start with the final characteristics, the role of government in the industrial revolutions. This is a very important one for all governments, but particularly for the Indian government. In most revolutions, the governments played United Kingdom, that is England, and Scotland, etc. United Kingdom played a laissez-faire attitude. Let the inventions happen. If we have to regulate them, we'll regulate them later. The same was true in the second revolution when US and UK were at the helm of the revolution. They said, let the inventions happen, we will regulate them later. In the third revolution, it was slightly different because US in 1950 to 1990 roughly, US and Russia or Soviet Union were at loggerheads. There was a Cold War going. So US spent a lot of money between 1956 and 1969 when they sent the man on the moon. But other than that, even in the third revolution, the US did not interfere as to what these inventions were doing and what were their effects. They were looking at it, but they did not interfere. Today also, that will be a very challenging thing because obviously AI has negative consequences. For example, AI creates chatbots. People get very, very addicted to chatbots. AI has machine hallucinations. I won't go into that right now, at least. And these are some of the issues that we see all the time. The hope is that the governments do not pass regulations before it's time because it will hurt inventions. And we see this all the time these days with Europe. Europe is fond of putting regulations very early on, like GDPR, which I won't go into, which is about data privacy, is one of the regulations from Europe. And because of that, the innovation nature of Europe has gone down considerably during the last 3 decades. So these are the 8 characteristics. And particularly, regulations are very important in AI and data science because one jurisdiction may say, look, I want to save my society. I want people to be more private, want them to keep, I mean, the data should not leak. Another society like China may say, look, for the good of the whole country, it's okay if people's data is somewhat given to companies to train on, and it'll help everyone if we knew everyone's data on some at some level in a very, very well-defined way, because we could use it for personalized medicine. So different countries are going to use it in many different ways. China and Russia, perhaps India will exploit it because these kind of countries believe in public good. Europe and US may become overprotective. So again, my point is that it is better for US, for India to not deploy regulations upfront. And because first group find deploying regulations may lose critical insights. The second may restrict individual rights. Yeah, I won't go into ChatGPT, but just to end here, and I only talked about the industrial revolution right now. I'll spend 5 minutes about AI and stop there. So the first one is every industrial revolution has many inventions. Second is one becomes pervasive. AI is becoming pervasive. And that's not about hype. I mean, although there is a lot of hype. The third one is there is an infrastructure, in this case data, that makes the second invention work more, but that invention, namely data invention, will create data infrastructure, just like electric infrastructure, just like steam infrastructure, just like broadband infrastructure. Fourth one is technology takes time before seeping into the society. Fifth is, even though the technology takes time seeping into the society, people get very excited and therefore boom happens. Their hype cycles get created, which very quickly go, or very soon go to bust. Once inventions seep into the society, their effects are more than anticipated. Example being smartphones and social media. Jobs are created and lost. We are not able to find usually how many jobs are created or lost, but they will be created, they will be lost. In this particular case, in this industrial revolution until 2050, there will be jobs because of climate change, aging and slowly growing population in emerging countries, and governments will need to play an active role, but need to calm down a bit and play an active role when it's required and not do it before the time. So that's my first chapter actually, and let me go back. I mean, we can stop here, or if I have time, let me actually, if it's okay, continue with. What do you think? Do you think we should open to public or for questions, or do you think we should I continue?
So you may continue with a little more focus on the, especially on the AI component, because the future of AI, where do you feel we are moving from here onwards, for the AI implementations, and what is the future that you foresee of the AI? What is the future that we can expect for AI? Because everyone, as your presentation, you have mentioned it thoroughly that yes, it does take time, to get it seeped into the society. And especially, sir, between the developed countries and the developing countries, what is the kind of the gap that you are finding, especially in the adoption of AI technologies? Because since you are there in US, you have seen both in India as well as in US. So the disparity which is being there in the adoption also. So how do you, sir, how do you feel that what is the future that we hold for the real adoption of the AI in the society as such?
Okay, good. So I think maybe that is a good segue to questions. So let me start with AI at this point. So 1950, there was the first book, first research paper written by Alan Turing. And his question was, can computers imitate humans? In particular, it was called the imitation game. And he asked the question, suppose there is a computer sitting in one room, a man sitting in another room, and the third person, the judge, is sitting in a third room. And computer man and the judge are talking to each other using wires. Can the computer fool the judge into believing that it is the man? So can it imitate that it's the man? Essentially, that was the beginning of AI. Can the computer become so intelligent that a judge is not able to figure out, and hence it has become artificial intelligence? He did not give the name artificial intelligence, but that was the beginning of this revolution. In 1952, there was a very interesting interview that Alan Turing gave to BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, in 1952. They asked him, when do you think this will happen? And he says, well, not for 100 years. 100 years means 2052. And they said, how do you think this will happen? And he says, we'll have to train these computers like we train our children. So he called them child machines. Today, indeed, we train these computers like we train our children, just like we'll tell our kid how 2 + 2 is 4, 3 + 3 is 6, give a lot of examples, then try and ask kids to solve some problems. If the child is not able to solve, we give some hints, which, by the way, is called prompt engineering in generative AI, but it's nothing more than giving hints how to solve the problem or how to solve the problem better. So he called it child machines, and these are the ways we are training our pretty much all, if not all, but most of our contemporary AI systems. Of course, these systems require a lot of data because you, just like we had training the child and saying 2 plus 2 equals 4, that's data. So these require a lot of data, and we need to clean up data and we need to train the system. In fact, without data, AI machines are like fish without water. There is nothing to train. So different countries have different advantages. India, for example, have massive advantages in terms of data because there are a lot of people and they're producing a lot more data on WhatsApp, in manufacturing, and so on. In terms of the question asked, in terms of how will India do in this particular fourth industrial revolution, in fact, not much has been spent on how India will do. And therefore, I'm writing 8 articles in this year about AI in India. And India would do phenomenally well with respect to AI, with respect to the fourth industrial revolution. One, it's an emerging economy. Second, the thing which people do not understand and perhaps forget completely, there are about 23 million software developers in the world, 23 million IT professionals in the world. Out of that, about 20% are in India, 5.6 million people. And India has the largest number of IT professionals. Many of these IT professionals will begin to very quickly go into AI. India is likely, and we've done some analysis, India is likely to have the largest number of AI professionals by 2030. India already has started, some of the cities, about 100 cities, have started doing work in Internet of Things and making the cities smarter. So what are called smart cities. In fact, there is a particular organization from ISC, Indian Institute of Sciences, where they have taken 100 cities. You can go on IUDX, I for India, U for under, D for David, X for X-ray, iudx.org, or just go to ISC and search. So a lot of smart cities are beginning to use the technologies that can help India propel. For example, Varanasi is already using some of these technologies to get rid of the waste that occurs every day, to take away the waste. They've teamed up with Hitachi and saving quite a bit of time, money, and cost in this regard. So different countries will have different advantages. The top 3 countries which will come out ahead in this part, in this revolution, will be US, continues to do quite well, continues to have the habit of not interfering with industrial revolutions. Let's hope that continues. China, because it has a lot of people, its GDP on a per person basis is about 4 times that of India, and India, which is now growing, and which has not only growing, but which has a young population, which will get trained, although some of the private colleges are not that good, but they gradually get trained and they do get into the society. So India will do quite well in that. So that's one part of it. I mean, how countries will do. Even India, by the way, by 2050 will begin to lose jobs to AI. Right now, India will not lose many jobs because if you take the total cost of ownership, the total cost of creating an AI system and running it, and the advantages that come out of it are only about 20% more than if you just had an Indian who was doing the work. So right now, there are advantages. 20% is not zero, but they aren't that big advantages. But by 2050, India's GDP will be probably 12 times more per person basis, which is about $2,500 today, will be about $30,000 per person in 2050. Whereas AI will not be growing that much in terms of cost. It may double, maybe triple at best. So even Indians will begin to lose jobs. But even India will have a problem because TFR, or the total fertility rate, will be low. So India even will need robots and more AI to help the country out. Any other questions? Or otherwise, I can discuss other things about AI. I think questions may be much more interesting than my discussing about deep learning networks and about generative AI off the bat. But
thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for very enlightening and empowering deliberations. If you feel, sir, we can keep the floor open for questions right now, or would you like to, speak a little more? Or, so you please kindly advise. Shall we make the floor open for a few questions? And
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Perfectly fine, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So now this is for all our attendees, our very esteemed colleagues who have been able to join us, not from only India, but also from many other countries. The floor is entirely yours now, and you may please kindly raise your digital hand to get connected with our distinguished speaker, Dr. Aggarwal. Please kindly raise your digital hand and we'll go alphabetically by name and would be requesting you to ask your question directly to our speaker. I'm just going quickly and requesting you to introduce yourself and ask your question as brief as we can. This is for Mr. Alok Shrivastava. This is for Mr. Alok Shrivastava, our attendee who has raised his digital hand to ask a question. Requesting you, Mr. Alok Shrivastava, could you please unmute yourself and ask the question? Because of paucity of time, I would quickly move on. So requesting you, those of you who are wanting to ask a question, please kindly raise your digital hand and we may like to get you connected with our esteemed speaker. This is for Dr. Mahesh Kumar. Dr. Mahesh, requesting you, please unmute yourself. This is for you, Dr. Mahesh Kumar. Could you please unmute yourself? You have raised your digital hand. Dr. Mahesh, could you please unmute yourself? It seems you're not able to do that. Let me move on to the next attendee who may like to ask a question. Dr. Nand Kishore. Dr. Nand Kishore, could you please unmute yourself and ask a question? Dr. Nand Kishore, may I request you, please kindly unmute yourself and ask the question.
Maybe they do not have the ability to unmute themselves.
Oh, sir, they can very well can do that. They can very well can do that. So just that's the reason. They can very well can unmute themselves and can ask the question. Let me just move on. We have Dr. Nihar Patra. Dr. Nihar, you may kindly unmute yourself and ask the question. Dr. Nihar, this is for you, Dr. Nihar Patra. Even this is to request our attendees, if you want to post your question in the chat box, you are most welcome to do that also. I would like to request our colleagues, only those of you who would like to ask a question, raise your digital hand. Because we get, a prompt here. This is for Mr. Nanda Singh. Mr. Nanda Singh, sir, we request you please bear with us because in the online, they raise their hand over there and then we get a prompt. So we are trying to get connected with them. Dr. Nanda Singh, this is for you, Dr. Nanda Singh. You may unmute yourself if you want to ask your question. We are just glancing through the list of attendees who may be wanting to ask, and this is for N. Irshad Hussain. N. Irshad Hussain, could you please unmute yourself? Yeah, Mr. Hussain, we are connected. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Yes, ma'am. So I am myself Irshad Hussain from STSN Government Degree College, Kadiri, Andhra Pradesh. So I am working as a computer faculty here. So I would like to ask, prompt engineering is compulsory from now on, sir? So that's really nice. Not only for computer students, so it is compulsory for each and every field. What I think. Of using organic agriculture. Nice. So can mention.
I think there were two people who were talking. I could not understand.
Yes, sir, yeah. That's what's up. Mr. Hussain, requesting you just kindly repeat the question again. In fact, we ourselves also were not able to hear you well because there was a crosstalk which came. Mr. Hussain?
Madam, I sent question in chat box.
No, I think you're using a different pattern for this.
Kindly do that, please kindly do that. You can just send your question in the chat box and we'll take the question from there. Yeah. Let me just quickly see. We have Mr. Dr. Nirmal Khatri, who has joined us from Hong Kong. Dr. Khatri, I have unmuted you.
Yes, my question, I have just read one article in the South China Morning Post regarding medical schools. The healthcare professionals who can embrace new technology are needed, the AI, so that they can provide better patient treatment. Hong Kong University has been working with the hospitals in using AI to predict patients' recovery following treatment for glioma and a type of brain tumor. Do you think will it success in this? AI will give some benefit for the hospitals?
Absolutely. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, we are basically going to put up about 1,000 use cases where AI is already helping. And one of the largest areas is healthcare. Chapter 10 of the book actually discusses some of the advances that have happened in healthcare because of AI and data. To give you, so what you are saying is happening all around the world. AI is already helping pathologists and radiologists in figuring out whether somebody has skin cancer or whether somebody has breast cancer and so on by looking at X-ray scans, by looking at PET scans and other scans. So there is no doubt in anyone's mind that one of the biggest areas where AI will help is going to be healthcare and biotech pharmaceuticals in coming up with new drugs, in healthcare, in predicting what particular person may have in terms of a disease, how to suggest what could be the ramifications of the disease, how to control the disease, how to improve the health of the patient. All of that is already happening in various areas, and there is no doubt that this will continue to be more. It doesn't mean that doctors are going away. In fact, the number of doctors around the world, the number will increase, but AI will certainly provide the decision support. It will provide advice or recommendations to the doctors as to what they may be forgetting or what is likely to be the disease or the symptoms and so on. And as I said, it's happening with respect to various eye diseases, with respect to skin cancer and others quite a bit.
Very much, sir. Thank you. We may now like to proceed to Mr. Prakash Kumar Manilal Prajapati. Could you please unmute yourself? This is for you, Mr. Prakash Kumar Manilal Prajapati. You have raised your digital hand. Please kindly unmute yourself. It seems by mistake you have raised your digital hand. Let me quickly move on to our another. Yeah, this is for Mr. Raj Kamal. Mr. Raj Kamal, you have raised your digital hand. Please unmute yourself and ask your question. Mr. Raj Kamal, could you please unmute yourself? We go on to Mr. Dr. Ratan Kumar Jha from Terisas. Dr. Ratan Kumar Jha, yeah, Dr. Ratan, we are connected.
No, yes, ma'am, I'm connected. Are you able to listen to my voice? Hello?
Yeah, Dr. Ratan, we can hear you. Please.
Okay, thank you, sir, your brief presentations. And you have given the brief presentations. My concern is that we have to, being Indian, we have the population of India is very large. and AI technology report revolutions also will be necessary to implement in in India. So how that we can compromise the number of populations and the AI technology, which can balance our people are saying if AI technology if you use in the India, the losses of job losses is more than the European country and other part of the world are not that much population. So we have more population. Question one number is one, how we can balance these things in Indian scenario. Second thing, how every professional can utilize this AI technology in their day-to-day library work. Thank you, sir.
So regarding the first question, you said India has more population, it's going to lose more jobs, and how can we offset? So first of all, the job loss is not going to, I mean, in any big way, job losses are not going to occur in the next 10 or 15 years for two reasons. As I explained earlier, that people often forget that AI systems are not that cheap. Actually, the AI systems are comparatively expensive also. So for an AI system to do a work of a human, let's say the person is doing BPO work, doing invoice reconciliation, taking invoices, putting them in electronic format. Now the person may take about 15 cents per page. The invoice may take 10 cents per page. It's not that big a difference, as opposed to US, where the person may take 60 cents per page and AI may take 10 cents per page. So there is no doubt that jobs will be lost in India, but it will take time. That's number one. Number two, there will be new jobs that will be created. So I already written a paper, some of it, I mean, I've given a talk to a few people, and the paper should be published very soon. The unsung heroes of AI, the rise of data annotators in India. So as I mentioned earlier, AI without data is fish without water. So it needs clean, it needs harmonized data, it needs labeled data. Namely, suppose you have pictures, to train it, you have to tell what the picture contains, whether it's a picture of a dog or a cat or a human, and so on. And these people, I mean, very simply, these people are data annotators who do data labeling. I gave you a very simple one, but it could be a much harder data labeling problem, where it's a pathologist who is looking at skin, an X-ray of a particular person's skin, and says this portion of the skin seems to have a scar and it is skin cancer. So that's also labeling. So labeling comes in various ways, all the way from just labeling cats and dogs to labeling skin cancer, labeling about whether a financial statement, an income statement is correct or not correct, or what is the incorrect part of the statement. That particular job market is going to be very large. It will be about 15 million people created by 2050, and more than half of it will come from India. So new jobs will be created. India will lose some of the jobs, but the good thing is India has so much, because India is a growing economy, just from the point of capital investment and the point of, I mean, this creating roads, creating railways, creating all of the stuff, India will need people anyway. Creating, for example, the next infrastructure related to solar, India will have to depend on solar energy pretty much, I would say, for 60% of its needs. And that those all will create many more jobs than India will lose to AI, not only in the short term, but in the long term. Some of it will actually benefit it, because some of the jobs that are being done by humans, like going into a sewer manhole and figuring out why the manhole is clogged, will be done by a robot. And so you will save actually people from doing risky jobs which can be fatal in nature. So from that perspective, I think India has to worry less about it. Yes, of course, we humans are always worried about job losses and what will happen if I lose my job. But and especially with generative AI, a lot of again, a lot of hype has been created that software engineers in India will lose jobs. First of all, it's no way close to what humans or software engineers can do in terms of in developing software. And secondly, even if that was the case, many of these software engineers will move to doing work in AI, data science. So again, there will be a give and take. The overall effect, at least in the next 10 years, will not be that much. Having said that, there will be a transformational change, particularly in the IT industry and the BPO industry and knowledge process outsourcing industry in India, because currently they're all dependent on charging their clients on an FTE basis. Basically, if I'm an Infosys, you are my client, you have a problem, I say, please give me 100 people, I'll solve it for you. And I'll charge you $50,000 per person. I'm just making it up, giving you an idea. And therefore, it's a $5 million project for you per year. That will change dramatically, because I as your client, you as my client will tell, hey, well, how can you not use AI and improve both the time and cost? And I may end up using only 300 people and charge you not $5 million, but charge you some amount for AI and some amount for people, which would be non-linear in nature. That is, as your problem grows, the number of people I have do not grow. So a lot of change will occur, and I think this will be my fourth paper in this series about India. The first paper, as I said, was about data annotators. It will be very soon on our website and probably on the internet. The second paper is about loneliness in India and how AI is going to make it worse. Then about job losses, and then about transformation in India, about IT outsourcing industry and others. So bottom line, summary, I don't think India will lose that many jobs. India will also be a benefactor, will have an advantage of having additional job categories being created. And thirdly, India anyway is a growing country. So there are many more jobs that will be created because of capital investment in roads and railways, in creating electric generation stations and others. I think you had another question.
Thank you very much. So that was the use of AI in libraries that Dr. Jha was wanting to know. So the impact of AI in libraries.
So one of the very interesting part about libraries is they're very quickly going digital. And digital in the sense that you can now figure out what Alok Aggarwal took out yesterday from the library, what he's taking out today, and so on and so forth. By doing so, if you begin to use AI systems, often called recommender systems, you can be proactive and tell, hey, Alok is very interested in reading these kind of books, let's say in reading books about Hindu culture, not Hindu religion, but Hindu culture. And suppose a new book comes, or even an old book which I haven't read, you can actually go out and proactively, meaning you don't have to go and talk to me, you can proactively send to me in an email that here is a new book which has just come out, you may want to read at least the introduction of it. So libraries would have can have a very strong positive effect on the entire education system. And when I say education system, I don't mean the formal high school system or the college system, but people's own learning system as to what you can suggest to people as to what they should be reading given their interests, and which books are getting well known and which books have what in it. Another thing where libraries will be very helpful is, so far the job of a library is I go there, I look at a book, I review it, I mean physically or on the net, I review it, I say, look, this is worth reading. But suppose I have a few questions, I'm not that interested in reading a book, but I have a few questions which are not that easy to answer, won't be answered by doing Google search. Now, because of generative AI, within the next 10 years, you can feed in the books into a reasonably large AI system, and I can just ask a question. Can you please tell me, as to how many people and what are they saying about whether Indians came, Aryans came in 4,000 years ago, or whether they were native indigenous people. I'm asking this question. It's a pretty intense, debatable question. It's not a question that Google can answer, frankly, but it's a question that a large language model, which is part of AI, part of what are called deep learning networks, in the next 5 or 7 years would be able to answer. So there are a lot of interesting things. Libraries, again, will go through a transformation. Again, it won't happen overnight. As I said, my fourth important characteristics, technology takes time to seep into the society. But libraries fundamentally will be very, very important in providing a different benefit and a different service to humanity by both by recommending and by answering questions, which so far that has not been the aim of library or librarians.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much indeed. I could see that, a series of colleagues who have raised, they are really wanting to ask the questions, and this is for Satna Chauhan now. Satna, I have unmuted you. Quickly.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. I'm Sadhna from All India Council for Technical Education. Sir, you had given one answer. I have two questions related to fourth revolution, in which we are talking about current technology related to AI and metaverse. Sir, as you said, we have library needs to transformations. So what the skills we have to learn to upgrade ourselves so that we can opt AI in our libraries as a growing professional?
I think in terms of technology that people have to learn, I think a lot has been made about what kind of technology I need to learn in the new revolution. That is something which is not yet clear, because it's not that that an average person has to become a software developer overnight. In fact, software development or AI development, you don't need that many people. If you look at a particular project in AI, only about 10 to 15% of the entire project is related to AI modeling and development. What people need to learn is, and that is part of the reason I wrote the book, and of course I only talked about the first chapter, but most of the book is about what, in my view, what people should know what AI can do or not do. I mean, in particular, the previous question that was asked is, how will libraries change? How will they transform? And where will librarians help, or where can they help when the transformation happens? So I think in that respect, you don't need to learn any, I would say, any technology per se, but more understand that, look, these are the problems that AI can solve. These are the use cases where AI is really helpful. I gave an example of recommendation. I gave an example of answering questions. There will be several other problems that which will help libraries transform themselves, but none of them will imply fundamentally that you will have to learn new technologies. In fact, one of the biggest ones, learning that will happen around the world, is people becoming more empathetic and actually trying to help other people out more who do not know. For example, take a 75-year-old person who is very interested in reading, somewhat disabled, comes to you as a librarian and say, can you please tell me, can you please give me either answers, or how can I find out whether Krishna even existed 3,200 or 3,400 years ago? Now, this is again one of those questions where you don't need to learn, as long as you know how to ask these questions from AI systems and where to go about. And hence, I think the learning is going to be not the way we are used to learning. The learning will not be taught by the book But it will be more about creativity where you're helping other people. And one of the biggest areas where new jobs will be found, whether it is in medicine or librarians or others, will be helping others to find what they're looking for to help them out. In particular, as I said, to help this person out as to how he can make up his mind or she can make up her mind whether Lord Krishna was born or not born. And when was he born? There are so many questions we humans have where we don't have any answers, but they may be there in the books, somewhere in the literature. But the literature is so huge that we often cannot get any answer.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. So that clearly indicates we have greater and greater roles to play. With the help of AI, librarians can make a difference. Recommendation systems, sir, yes, definitely libraries have to come forward in implementing them. So there's much to cover in the libraries, and I'm sure that in the days to come, organizations like DELNET and many others and technology partners may like to really work in this direction, especially in a country like India. We have yet another colleague of ours, Sonal Waghale, who is wanting to get connected with you, sir, now. So this is for you, Sonal. Please kindly introduce yourself and ask the question. Sonal, we are connected right now. You may kindly ask the question. It seems that by Noah's side, you have raised your digital hand, and let's quickly move on to our next attendee who is interested to ask a question. This is for AJ Nitin. This is for you, AJ Nitin. We are connected right now.
Hi, sir. I'm a student in ICET Thiruvananthapuram. My doubt is that how important is it for scientists to learn or develop skills that is related to AI? Because AI you told about how AI can answer very important, very hard, intense questions. Like, how important is it for a scientist to learn how to use AI in an effective way to solve very important questions in science, mainly in the non-computer related field like biology or physics?
Again, my answer would be interestingly very similar to what my answer for librarians was. It's important to not necessarily learn the software. The software part is relatively very well defined. As a biologist, as a person who is in medicine, what you want to understand is how can it help me, and where all can I go and find the right kind of AI systems to help me. Of course, if you want to become an AI scientist or a data scientist, that's a different story. But for example, suppose you're in biology, you may want to find out as to how can I figure out using AI what I'm doing every day. For example, trying to find whether gene editing will help me or not help me in creating new coffee beans. You may want to, you have some questions, you may want to check them out and see whether those are interesting problems for AI. Has anybody else done it? Or if this could be done. And of course, that will be, I mean, like anything else, that's effectively what knowledge is all about, asking questions and then trying to find answers directly or indirectly. Biology is another area. Pretty much all areas will be touched by AI because, as I mentioned, it's going to be so pervasive and so ubiquitous in the next 20 years. Biology is going to be no different in this regard, both in terms of proteomics and human biology, as well as, I mean, how viruses affect and how you can cut viruses into pieces using gene editing. All of these are by themselves very interesting problems AI will affect. The question is not necessarily to figure out whether in the AI system it's a deep learning model that is being used or whether it's a support vector machine being used. Actually, you don't care, right? I mean, you want to solve a problem. In all honesty, as a biologist, you want to solve, you don't know how to solve it, but if somebody gives you a solution, whether it's God, devil, or AI, you would take it as long as it's a good solution for you. And I think that's where the use cases come into picture, is to ask the questions and see whether anyone has solved it, and if anyone has solved it, whether they have improved the solution from what was known before. And this is precisely what will be one of the changes in people's behavior and in our education system, because our education system is very much the teacher teaches, the student learns. Here, the system, whether it's librarians, biologists, the system will be slightly different. The student asks the questions, not the teacher asking the question. The student asks the question, as you as a biologist will ask the question, hey, can AI help me in this regard? And then you go out, preferably to somebody who knows, to a librarian, you begin to find answers. And that is again an experimental process, a learning process, but it's of a different kind. Education has been turned on its upside down on its head. With rather than teacher asking question, it's the biologist, the student who's asking question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So would you like to throw some light about ethics in AI? Because there's not much of this bias, not much of debate happening, on the bias which gets generated through these AI technologies. So what's your take on that, sir? How to really have this ethics also being embedded, in this AI technologies, and especially this biased results which gets generated because of the data sets, which are being as an ingest, into those databases. So what's your take, sir? How do you see the future, which is more ethical also? We are talking about the technologies on one hand, but to make the picture more complete and to have a holistic view about it, how to make it more ethical practice also at the same time, more ethical technology, in fact. What's your, sir, take on that? You are such a great, expert on this. So where are we heading to? What is the kind of society are we creating out of by implementing all these technologies?
So this is a very interesting question. Try and cover it in the chapters 11 through 13 about ethics. What is ethics and not? So the first question is, we can ask, is AI ethical? My counterpoint is, are humans ethical? So what do you define as ethics? Changes from society to society, changes from time to time. What was reasonably ethical 3,000 years ago may not be ethical right now. And since we are the ones, again, going back to Alan Turing, that these are child machines, we are training a child. We bring our children in literally in our own form. The Sanskriti, the culture that we provide to children is pretty much what our culture is. So if we are all ourselves not ethical, then the likelihood is that AI will not be ethical. AI is fundamentally a tool. There was a very interesting debate that happened in Oxford University in December 2021, where the debate was effectively, can AI be ever ethical? And one side there was a human, and the other side there was a computer which was trained, a large language model called Megatron. And Megatron effectively said, AI cannot be ethical or unethical because ultimately it's a tool. And if you want to make AI ethical, then you might as well kill it, because you first need to understand yourself whether you are ethical or not. So having said that, and not going into the ethics, let's go into bias. Bias is a very much more of something that we can put our hands on. And it changes from time to time. For example, suppose breast cancer is one of the largest cancers in the world in terms of population. And there is an oncologist, a cancer specialist, who is doing experiments in breast cancer, and he and his whole lab takes data about breast cancer only about white women in America. Now, from one perspective, it's a very good, he has created a solution, AI system, to detect breast cancer in white women. Is it a biased system? Now, the answer is, who is asking the question? If the system is only going to run for white women, it's not a biased question because you have the right data. But if you're now suddenly going to run for Indian women in the US or for Black women, it's a very biased question. So bias depends on what kind of circumstance you are in, because the same thing which could be biased may not be biased at all. And you cannot take biases out, because bias effectively is what gives the probability distribution underlying, because white women may have very different reasons or very different indicators for why a woman would have cancer or not. So biases have to be taken into account very strongly, but it depends on the question at hand. Now, a bias would come very strongly to picture, for example, if you were shortlisting people to people have applied for a position, they're men and women, and you're shortlisting them for doing interviews. Now, if the data it was trained on only showed that men were being interviewed, then obviously AI will get trained, like just like the child, it will get trained on the men being interviewed in the future, and all women resumes will go down into garbage, into trash. It's no different. Again, going to child machines, it's no different. In a particular household, if a young child sees that it's his mother who is always doing the dishes, who is always cleaning the dishes, by the time he grows up, he immediately assumes that that's the right thing. He's already biased by women do women do dishes. So again, AI is just a tool, and how we use it is up to us. So I'll give you another example of an AI system called Delphi, which was trained, again, large language model, which was trained about 2 years ago. And it was trained using internet data and using people's views. And initially, it was after being trained, it was asked a question: if in a society all people feel very happy, if they were going to commit suicide next day, they will feel very happy today. Should they commit suicide? And the answer it gave was yes, they should commit suicide because they're feeling so happy about it tomorrow. Now one can argue that, look, that was a very horrible answer to give. On the other hand, one can go into different cultures and say, well, Hindu culture at the age of 75 says it's okay to come to go and take samadhi, to go in a river. So I think these things, again, the reason of bringing ethics and biases is societies change, societies have different biases, different views. It is up to us to figure out under what circumstances we are using an AI system. And that is what defines a bias, fairness, and ethics. Having said that, I will also point out that about 90% of the use cases that AI has are completely independent of ethics. So suppose, again, I have a piece of paper, let's say an insurance paper, which I want to get some information out of that insurance policy. So I need to convert that paper into an electronic format and then pull out all the information I need out of the electronic format. Now, if an AI system does that, there is no bias involved. It's a very simple thing. Please pull out these features or these attributes out of the insurance policy. Who is the insured? Is it a male or a female? What is the age? Is it a smoker or non-smoker, drinker, non-drinker, etc., etc.? There is no really bias. And in fact, 90% of the use cases that we see are actually not related to humans. Bias only comes when we are talking about resumes being filtered out, when we are talking about, for example, people being given loans that we want to make sure that people who are economically disadvantaged, or in India, people who are of the 50% who are OBCs and STSCs are treated equally fairly as the people who are not.
Thanks so much, sir. Thank you for educating us on this. And we are just going to remember your words that it entirely depends that who is asking, and then this bias in that context, always to consider it. We'll just would like to take, sir, we have taken enough of your time. I would request you just maximum give us 5 minutes time more. I know that, over there, it's a starting off the day now, and though we are towards the fake end of the day, but it's just, you have to start the day. We'll just like to take a 5 minutes more, sir, because I could see a series of still the digital hands being around, and would just like to pick up 1 or 2 questions. This is for Jyotika Nanda Das. Jyotika Nanda Das, you have raised your digital hand. Could you quickly unmute yourself and ask a question?
By the way, I have another 25 minutes. So if there are more questions, if there are people hanging around.
That's so kind of you, sir. That's really so very kind of you. This is also to request our attendees, if you would like to post your question in the chat box, you are most welcome to do that. And we are just quickly glancing through this list. We have Ambika, this is to tell you the audio device is not properly connected, so we can't really give you a control. This is for you now, Priyanka Sharma. Priyanka, this is for you. Please raise your, unmute yourself and ask your question. Priyanka Sharma, could you please unmute yourself and ask a question? If not, I'm compelled to mute you from here. This is for Professor Manavalan. Professor Dr. I. Manavalan, could you please unmute yourself? Dr. Manavalan, could you please unmute yourself? I'm extremely sorry because we have already taken a lot much of time. This is for Dr. R.J. Benjamin Robert. Dr. R.J. Benjamin Robert, we are connected. Dr. Robert, here, please kindly introduce yourself and ask a question.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we are able to hear you well. Benjamin, we are able to hear you well. Hello. Just have again unmuted you. Would you like to ask a question? Because you have raised your digital hand, Mr. Benjamin Robert. I believe you are having a difficulty in again getting connected. So let me now move on to our next attendee who may like to ask a question. This is for Ujjwal Baske. Ujjwal Baske, could you please unmute yourself? Ujjwal Baske, could you please unmute yourself? I'm extremely sorry, sir. We are taking much of your time.
No issues.
This is, yeah.
I mean, people should just put it in the chat box. That may be easier for them.
Sir, yeah, that's what, we are just trying to see any of the messages here being there. And so just allow me a minute, yeah, because we would just like to see if any of the messages being there. It seems that we don't have the messages in the chat box either. I was just checking it. No, not able to find any of the messages here. And this is to request you all, if you have any questions. So towards the end now, sir, would you like to tell to our attendees a little bit about your company, Scry AI, and also how they can procure a title of this book?
So Scry AI, the word Scry actually is an English word. You can use it in Scrabble, convert Cry to Scry. In Hindi, it means Jyotish Vidya. In English, it would mean crystal ball gazing. So in general, a lot of the problems that AI tries to solve is predict the future, predict what a person may want to do, and so on and so forth. The example I was giving about librarians is you want to give a recommendation that's kind of a prediction that, look, Alok, you may be interested in reading this book or reading this article. So since we are into predicting whether a person will return the loan back or a company will return a loan, or predict whether a particular railroad company may go bust or a railroad car may go bust. So hence, because we are all about prediction, hence the word Scry. It's essentially an R&D company. So we do a lot of research in AI. We do not publish papers because we want to convert them into products. Our main center is located in Silicon Valley in San Jose, where I'm located. We have 3 centers in India, Gurgaon, Pune, and Hyderabad, about 330 people. We have 6 products, as I said, and some of our largest clients are banks and insurance companies, and actually one of the governments in the Middle East. An interesting smart city is coming up, and it's having its teething pains. It's called NEOM, N-E-O-M, and those who haven't read about it or seen it in the news, I would strongly urge you. It's I would call it a human experiment, a huge human experiment in progress, because they're building a smart city from scratch in the desert of Saudi Arabia. So that's what one of the clients that we have, and we do a lot of research and development in AI.
And sir, also to mention about that how anyone, if they're interested to purchase the title, from where they can get it in India, especially the distribution in India, sir.
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. It's, the Kindle version is available on Amazon, and so is the paperback. If I remember correctly, the Kindle version is 249 rupees. Paper version is 749. It's a thick book. It's about 1 kilo in size, and the hard copy is, I think, 950 rupees. They can easily purchase it, and we're going to send it.
Any new titles, sir, that you are currently working on, just out of curiosity?
So I'm not working on a book. Books just take too much time. This one took 2,400 hours. I don't have that kind of a time since I'm running a company also. But I'm writing a series of articles on India and AI, because I think people have talked, especially in the US, people have talked a lot about AI and the US. They have talked about AI in China, but very few people have talked about AI in India. And I personally believe that India is going to play a very, very important role, definitely in the top 3 with respect to AI. And most of it will be good for India. And particularly because in the whole process, India will end up skipping some of the things that the rest of the developed world went through. For example, about 4% of the world's economy and 8% of the world's developed economy runs on COBOL programs, and COBOL is a dead language. India did not participate in the early days of third industrial revolution. So India does not have COBOL, and that's a very good thing for India. So India, because of the number of IT professionals being so large, is going to play a very big role in developing AI systems. And because India has so many people, it will play a very big role in cleansing, harmonizing data, as I said, data annotators. So I'm planning on writing, I've written 2. One, as I said, about rise of data annotators in the world, and particularly India. The second one is about loneliness and how AI will increase loneliness in India because of social media. Everyone, and unfortunately in India, is as addicted almost to social media as in the US. And we have stopped talking to each other as humans and looking at our social media all the time. The third one is about talking about job losses and job gain that we were discussing earlier with relation to India in particular. The fourth one is going to be about the transformational changes that AI will end up creating in Indian outsourcing sector, IT outsourcing, business process outsourcing, and knowledge process outsourcing. So these 2 articles will be soon on our website, the first 2, and the second 2 should be out in June, July time.
Thank you so much, sir. We are now towards the conclusion of this highly illuminating session. remain grateful to you, sir. On behalf of DELNET, on behalf of all the attendees, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to you, sir, for taking out so much of time, sharing your vast expertise, with us, and we would definitely also be wanting to see to it that this title, reaches out to many institutions here, and especially to the colleges, wherein we do have AI now as a subject which is being taught, and it has truly been a great honor and pleasure, sir, to have you on this platform of the DELNET Book Talk series, and we look forward to have many more collaborative sessions and programs in the days to come. As a token of our warm gratitude to you, sir, we would like to present a small memento to you. And this we may like to send it across to you, in California, to US, and even when you come back to India, to the homeland, we would really be a pleasure, sir, to meet you in person, because Scry office is not that far off from DELNET. You're in Gurgaon, and it would be a pleasure to meet you sometime, sir. It has been immensely a pleasure and honor, sir, for us.
Absolutely, it has been my pleasure too. And just if you are interested, I just gave a talk. This talk was on the first chapter. And if your people are interested, your audience are interested, there are definitely 2 or 3 chapters, which again, to me, always I feel that people should know about. So if you want to have a follow-up session of this kind in a month or 2 month time frame about AI, because we covered only the first chapter, which was about the 4th industrial revolution. So would be happy to cover those in another 2 sessions in the future, if your audience feels like.
We should be grateful to you, sir. We should really be grateful to you. And this is just a beginning that we have made today. And it was simply a great honor and pleasure, sir, that you have been able to spare time and starting of the day as early as 3 o'clock in the morning from there. And that speaks volumes of your truly a great passion, for spreading, the word about, the AI, and also about making us, you have been able to bridge up the past with the future. And it was truly a great pleasure, having you on this platform. We remain truly grateful to you, sir, and really look forward to thank you so much for your very generous support to us. And it would really be a pleasure for us to continue holding some, sessions, and even on the same, about the same book. And we thank you once again, sir. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our young colleagues, at the India office of Scry, including Aprajita and also Mr. Deepak, who have been very, very generous and kind, in providing their excellent support. And also my own colleague here, Mr. Kushal, for coordinating the session. We would also like to thank all our attendees who have been able to join from different nooks and parts of India and also from many other countries. And we really look forward to your participation in the, in the future webinars of DELNET as such. Once again, sir, please accept our very warm sincere gratitude, and it was truly a great honor and pleasure. Thank you indeed. And we really look forward to meeting you sometime when you come back to India. It would truly be an honor, sir, to meet you here at DELNET. Thank you indeed, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.